Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Top Rope Takes. I'm Jason Marcus alongside Willie Thrill. We are just a couple days away from Crown Jewel, the world's greatest house show. And man, Willie, what an exciting time. We got the Bloodline Civil War coming up. We have the matches for the first ever Crown Jewel championships that everybody in the world is clamoring for. We also have Kevin Owens and Randy Orton. We got so many things to talk about here. How you doing?
Doing great. Yeah, we do have a lot to talk about, and we'll be doing Crown Jewel predictions tomorrow. But today we're going to be focusing on the actual weekly shows leading up to Crown Jewel. I thought this week, man, I was really I thought Raw was kind of a weak show.
It
I
was
don't
a
know. I
rough week
thought
overall.
it was tough, but so that's why I was kind of like, should we do a show right after Raw,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I'm glad we did a show after this past NXT because I think NXT blew Raw out of the water this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought Raw was very weak. Even just like going through our preparation for this show, I was like, wow, there's really only like three things to talk about on this 2 hour show. But that's kind of just where the state of Monday Night Raw is. I don't know if it's going to be back into 3 hours once Netflix comes around. I'll be looking for that kind of confirmation. NXT I thought was good. I think let's just jump right into it. So let's start with Monday Night Raw. Biggest story coming out of Monday Night Raw is the reuniting of Jimmy and Jey Uso, seemingly on the same page, even though they don't trust each other. Sami Zayn's in the mix with this as well, as we kind of assumed he would be, but we got a little tease that maybe Sami Zayn is not as loyal to the Usos or specifically to main event Jey Uso as we had thought. What did you think about this reuniting of the Usos on
I think this is crazy because before Bad Blood,
Raw? Mm-hmm.
we were almost like we thought like after SummerSlam up until right before Bad Blood, the direction was always going to be OG Bloodline, new Bloodline leading into War
Yeah.
Games. Then going into Bad Blood, they were like, well, there's like not a lot of time to get this. And it seemed like Jay was doing, he just won the Intercontinental Championship. Jimmy
Right.
hadn't returned. It was like Cody and Roman teaming up. It felt like there wasn't a lot of time to get this thing going. And it almost made me think, okay, so I guess they're not doing OG Bloodline, new Bloodline,
Yeah.
which was weird to me. But then they just hit fast forward on it. Like as soon
Yeah.
as Bad Blood hit, Jimmy comes back. Then Jimmy's like, "We got to get Jey Uso." Jey Uso's like, "No, we can't do it." Jey Uso loses the Intercontinental. This is
Mm.
all in like the span of like 2 to 3 weeks
No,
when this is
literally.
all happening. And then, spoiler alert, if in case you haven't heard, they're throwing the ones up with Roman on SmackDown
Wow.
on Friday. So the fact that we've already gone from Jay, Jimmy, and Roman all being separate, Jimmy coming back, trying to recruit Jay, Jay and Jimmy reuniting, and now the OG Bloodline reuniting
Mm.
in that short period of time, it makes me feel like this is really rapid pace. But I heard this on another podcast. What's weird about it is that this is how Raw used to be. Like Raw
Mm-hmm.
used to go through storylines really quickly, but
Yeah.
because of the past few years with Triple H and the long-term storytelling that we've seen with like the Judgment Day, or
Mm-hmm.
what we're currently seeing now with like uh Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair, which will probably be a WrestleMania match,
Yeah.
or A Town Down Under, who they've been teasing a split for, months now. It's
Yeah.
like these things take time in this new era of wrestling that it just shocked me how quickly this whole OG Bloodline reuniting has come about. So I don't hate it. I want to make that clear. I don't hate that they've really hit fast forward because I do like that there's story beats on every single episode. There's something to take away, but it does feel rushed. Bottom line, it just feels like they really rushed it to try to get um this OG Bloodline, new Bloodline match on Crown Jewel.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. But at the same time, like I would almost rather than rush a story to get to a destination that makes more sense than like that because like we had talked about, the War Games match that we anticipate to be coming up to be like the new Solos Bloodline versus like Cody and the Super Friends. And I like to me like that just wasn't as interesting of a matchup as the Bloodline Civil War. And so I think it's better that we now have kind of set the table for that by rushing this part of the story a little bit as opposed to well because the other universe is, well, I know everyone wants to see Solo's bloodline versus the OG bloodline, but we're not there yet, so we're still going to give them Randy Orton and Kevin Owens. So like, I would rather have the match I want to see if it means hitting fast forward on the middle part a little bit than being like dictated by this like false timeline, because there is no real timeline. They can do whatever they want in pro wrestling. And so I'm happy for that. And I do think this will eventually set us up nicely for that War Games match the following month.
Yeah, and here's the thing. As far as it making sense, I think from just in match interest standpoint, you're 100% right. Like this is a much more interesting match than Cody and the Super Friends versus New Bloodline. 100% agree with you there. It's just because of how the storylines have been paced before, a lot of it isn't making as much sense as it should. Like it does feel like Jey really did turn around pretty quickly on this thing. And I hope to see that it's not all like, you know, peaches and roses or whatever you want to say between Jey and Rome. Like there still should be some dissension, even if they do agree collectively that they're going to be unit against this new bloodline.
Yeah.
So what I do, that's why I'm not completely sour on it, because they do have time to tell that story, even though they're trying to unite right now. And I did think Jey did a good job of explaining it to Sami on Raw, being like, this is family. Like, and unfortunately he hit the hard line. Like, you won't understand. Like, you're not family.
Yeah.
Which is why I thought it was even more interesting when we saw Sami with Solo, because I do think Sami's going to end up on the OG bloodline side, but the fact that they're kind of teasing it, it was an interesting thing. And I also thought there was a funny thing that came up where, like, imagine if Sami did join the new bloodline and then became that, like, same role he was in the OG bloodline where he's like my dog. He's doing the dap up handshake with Jacob Fatu and shit.
Yeah.
Like, I think that would be hilarious.
It would be, but I think it would ruin Sami's character actually, because then he's
Well, it'd be
aligned
an
himself.
ultimate heel turn. Like, it would be
Right.
like weird. But I think the more interesting thing, not to cut you off, but like the interesting thing about this whole thing is if Sami gets involved with either side of the bloodline, we have on SmackDown a Kevin Owens who's against anyone aligning themselves with the bloodline.
Yes.
And so that, I think, is like the ultimate direction long term that they'll go into going into WrestleMania.
Oh, interesting. So you think this could lead to Kevin Sami at Mania again?
Yeah, well, this time it's going to be, I think the stipulations will be set up differently. And once we get closer to Mania, we'll talk about it more. But I do think at the very least, they're going to be separated for now, but then they're going to meet in the Royal Rumble. And maybe Roman can be in the ring at the same time too. And we got to get a call back to that Rumble 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Where, at the end of the show, like
the nuclear chair shot.
Yeah.
Real quick side tangent. Have Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn gone 1-on-1 at WrestleMania?
They have. I remember at 37 when Logan Paul was like he wasn't fully into wrestling yet, but he was at ringside for it. And then he tried to celebrate with Kevin Owens because Kevin Owens got the win, and then Kevin Owens hit with the stunner.
Interesting.
So that was the one time, but it didn't feel right because it was like half empty arena. Logan Paul was at ringside. Like, this would feel like a true Kevin versus Sami WrestleMania match. And I think there's going to be something that will raise the stakes.
They really are the Peter and the chicken of the WWE. They're always going to find each other, and I love it.
Exactly.
I just real quick to kind of wrap up on this thought. I agree with you that some of these story elements are rushed, but I do like the fact that they've kind of explained it away a little bit with, like, it's in Jey Uso's character to, really more than anything, he just wants the approval of his family, of Roman Reigns, which is why he is so quick to accept Jimmy when he comes back. But I also like the whole Solo and Sami aspect of it all too. What do you think if you had to guess right now, what do you think the explanation is that they give us as to why Sami Zayn was discussing with Solo Sikoa?
I think Sami was just simply like, you got to stay away from, like, Jay's been able to split himself away from this bloodline stuff. He doesn't want to be involved in this nonsense. Like, and that's what Sami was trying to explain to Jey. You don't have to choose between these two brothers. You've separated yourself from them on Raw, and you've become a star on your own. You've won the Intercontinental Championship. Yeah. So I think he's explained to so, like, don't get involved with Jey. Like, Jay's fine on his own. He doesn't need you guys anymore.
Yeah.
That's the good faith version. There's also a world where he's like Solo. I'm sick of Jay. I'm sick of
I don't think there's a role
but
to
it's,
it. Yeah.
I'm just saying if it
Yeah.
comes around that way, they can explain it that way as well.
What do you think the Bloodline would have to do or will do to get like Sami Zayn to, assuming to fully side with the Usos and Roman? Because like they got Jay, because Jay was hesitant to get involved again, and then they cost him the Intercontinental Championship. Sami Zayn doesn't really have anything that like they could take away from him, or and like where they're just going to beat him up, and that's going to be enough.
I think he'll be like collateral for going after, like if Jay's getting beat down by the new bloodline, Sammy still has like he's kind of tied in with Jey Uso in that way.
Yeah.
They're still really close,
Mm.
and he'll come in and make the save for Jay. I guess the bigger question is how does he reconcile with Jimmy and Roman, who
Right.
throughout the bloodline abused Sami Zayn.
Literally.
So that's I think the more interesting thing, and that's another reason why I think
Mm.
pacing wise this could get a little weird is
Mm.
where they're gonna have if they want to do Sammy on the OG bloodline side, they're gonna have to figure out a way for Sammy to go through that kind of reconciliation in a short amount of time.
Yeah. All right. So the bloodline, we'll talk more about it in our next video, give official predictions about going everything with Cody and Roman and all that. One of the things I want to talk about that we saw in Raw was we got the War Raiders, who won the tag team title tournament, defeating the New Day. LWO seemingly still involved with American Made. But I want to kind of talk about the state of the tag team champion division as a whole in WWE right now, because this past week we saw the Bloodline actually lose their SmackDown tag team titles as well to the Motor City Machine Guns in just their second show and their third match overall. Um, so I personally see the direction that Triple H is going with these titles, and I really like it. He recognized, which I think is half the battle, that the tag team division was weak. Finn and JD are weak champions. The Bloodline were weak champions. And he said, I am going to hotshot this division and we're going to put these titles on two legitimate tag teams that can put on NXT style black and gold era bangers every week. And I love that. So while the War Raiders don't have the titles yet, they did just win this championship. I'm assuming they're going to win them. I cannot imagine that Finn and JD are going to beat the War Raiders. Um, I'm excited for the direction of this tag team division now.
Yeah, I'm certainly excited for the direction on SmackDown. I absolutely love the Motor City Machine Guns winning the tag title. It makes them come onto the scene and they feel instantly like one of the most important tag teams in WWE, if not the most important tag team, by in just 3 matches winning the tag team championships. I thought that was awesome on SmackDown. I did not think it was awesome for the War Raiders to win this number 1 contendership match. We've talked about it for weeks now. I really thought the direction of this was going to be the New Day coming out and either winning the tag team championships or further progressing their story of losing. I guess they kind of did continue that story in this matchup, but I felt like it would have meant more if the tag team titles were on the line. There's another championship shot that either they finally did win or they were snuffed out again and you go forward from there. Now, as far as the War Raiders, they just came back. You want to make them look strong. And I do think they're going to win the tag team championships. I totally get where you're coming from. But I do think this New Day storyline has to end with them winning the tag team championships. And that's where I kind of am at a dilemma because the War Raiders are babyface tag team as of now. Obviously, they could change over time. But I think New Day wins it as tag team. The only other outcome I could see is, and this seems like way too far out, and of course we're terrible at predicting stuff like this, is Xavier Woods beating Braun Breaker for the championship.
Why did I know Braun Breaker is going to be involved?
Well, because I said it, we could never predict it. So why not go with it out there? Why not go with a top rope take by saying the guy to defeat Braun Breaker at the end of the day? Because that's the only other way I could see it. He's not beating Gunther.
No.
Clearly. And Xavier Woods hasn't had a singles title, and I feel like this pent-up frustration could ultimately lead to Big E being like, look, like you need to get your act together. You need to become Xavier Woods. He goes on a run. He becomes credible through winning singles matches the right way, and fans really start to get behind Xavier Woods. And then he ultimately challenges Braun Breaker, and
Yeah.
dethrones him. But that again, that's very out there. I understand
Yeah.
that probably not going to happen. They're probably going to want to give it to someone a
Yeah.
little more different, someone who could really stand up to Braun Breaker physically. But if it's not going to be the tag titles and it's not going to be the Intercontinental Championship, where is this going?
No, I completely agree with you. I do think it makes the most sense for them to win end this 10-year anniversary with them winning the tag titles. So maybe War Raiders don't win. Maybe Judgment Day, or well, I guess who's going to interfere? Like somebody going to interfere in that match between
Well, that's
War
the thing.
Raiders.
Like, right, is like you don't bring the War Raiders back for them to be fodder for Finn and JD to beat. Like,
Yeah.
I think you're right on with the War Raiders beating Finn and
Mhm.
JD for the titles. I mean, again, the only way it doesn't happen is if the plan really is for the New Day to beat Finn and JD. But if War Raiders wins and then you still want New Day to win the tag titles, I don't think the New Day is going to beat the War Raiders. So then are you really going to hot shot the War Raiders losing to a heel tag team?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see how it plays out. It definitely, muddies the waters a little bit, adds some confusion to it. We got a little bit more character development from Xavier Woods in this match too, by the way,
Yeah.
where it looked like Kofi kind of had the win, and Xavier Woods, instead of helping him, kind of went after the LWO, and it was just
Which, by the way, like I thought this was a weird way to do it because Xavier Woods wasn't wrong for going after Ray. Ray could have broken up the move that they were going to do or broken up the pin
yeah.
that would have had it won. So by Xavier Woods stuffing at Ray, it was almost like, okay, well, let me get Ray out of the way and then we
Mhm.
can hit our move. But I did like from Kofi's perspective being like, hey, we had this, like I set you up for this move and you decided to go after Ray. So I liked it from there. I thought the commentators were just a little
Yeah.
lackluster in their reasoning. They could have made Xavier Woods look a little smarter by going after Ray. I
Mhm.
mean, explaining that a little more rather than being like, what is he doing? It's like,
Right.
no, he could interfere with the outcome of this match. Why not take him out and then go for the move?
Right. Yeah, I think it's also weird too that they haven't addressed on commentary Xavier Woods' black gear yet. Like that he had, like
Yeah, that's yeah.
he hasn't been matching Kofi for weeks, and it's like they haven't addressed that. Like even in passing, like oh, like that the New Day are clearly aren't on the same page. They're not even dressed. That's my best Wade Barrett impression. Um,
I didn't know who you were being, but okay.
Xavier Woods must have gotten dressed in
Yeah,
a
okay.
closet. He's not even matching his tag team partner. Um,
We're losing our international viewers by the second.
we didn't have
That one
it.
might be our only viewers. Who knows? But
Yeah, my apologies. But yeah, I just think it's a weird note to like not address it. But either way, listen, I still like the story. It's still one of my favorite things on Raw because it is so narrative driven. Um, all right. So the other big thing on Raw is obviously Cody and Gunther. We're a couple days away from the anticipation's killing me, Will, of finding out who is going to be the first ever crown jewel champion, Cody or Gunther. But seemingly they've already started planting seeds about who Gunther is going to be taking on a following crown jewel. And would you believe it, Will? It looks like it's gonna be none other than Dirty Dominic Mysterio. Dirty Dom picking up a win over our former world champion, that being none other than Damian Priest, who I believe you called last week. It was not Sheamus. That was a bad call. Um, and he gets a win with a roll up because through the help of his Judgment Day cohorts. But are we going to get Gunther versus Dirty Dom for the world title? And if so, I need to know who is the heel because I don't think it's Dirty Dom.
really, okay. I think it 100% is Dirty Dom. How can like? I think he's. I don't think. I also did. They say if he won this match, he would be in a number one contenders match
Oh, maybe
for the
I thought
championship. Because that's what it was like. Did you get me? I saw last week when they were talking to Carlito. Um, they were like, Carlito, did you get me a number one contenders match? No.
mm,
But did you
maybe I
get me?
misunderstood.
But they said, no, I got you a match with the former world champion. If you win that, they'll put you in a number one contenders match.
Interesting.
So I think that opens the door for Dominic Mysterio to just get absolutely brutalized by Goldberg.
Oh my
Goldberg.
gosh.
And then, you go from there. Or you return the return of either Drew or Punk. That's the only other
Oh,
ones I've seen.
that's so interesting. Yeah, I must have missed that. It's so convoluted. Like it's the was that so that was a number two contenders match.
Right. Because I just
Uh,
don't see Gunther and Dom is such a weird match to me right now to do at this point. Because I don't think you want to try to get Gunther over as a uh baby face right now. And I feel like you kind of do that by putting up against the biggest heel in WWE,
yeah,
Dirty Dominic Mysterio. Because
I also
there's no way Dom comes out as a face. There isn't.
yeah I think in that scenario, I do think it's possible for those reasons that you just said. Like if they wanted to get Gunther a narrative as to why he's facing. I mean, if they want to give Goldberg a narrative as to why he's facing Gunther officially, and they want to make sure he's cheered, I could see them doing that. Here's my biggest hangup with that whole theory: they're not going to spend time building to a Gunther. I mean, I keep calling him Gunther. A Goldberg versus Dominic Mysterio PLE match. I just don't see that happening,
No.
and I definitely don't see it happening on a random Monday Night Raw. So
Okay. I I think it could pop a big rating, which I
yeah.
think they kind of want. And it doesn't have to be a crazy match. It could literally be Goldberg comes out, spears Dominic, 1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
Goldberg's the new number one contender. Or it could be a surprise match on Crown Jewel, where like Dominic comes out, hey, I
Mm-hmm.
want my number one contender. I want to face Gunther. I don't care who it is. Bring him out here. I'm gonna beat
Could see
him. I'm
that.
gonna be the number one contender. Goldberg comes out,
We
big
have heard
Saudi pop. You know,
we have heard reports that he's there.
yeah.
So
So
interesting. I don't hate it. I don't hate that. That's a top rope take. There you go. Gunther versus Dominic Mysterio, Crown Jewel
the
2024.
hidden match.
Well, the hidden gem.
Yeah, there
Uh,
you go.
all right. Anything else from Raw you want to talk about?
I it's so funny because just on an overall note, it like the strongest thing throughout Raw was the Bloodline stuff, and that's a
Mm,
SmackDown storyline. I Raw needs to figure out what's going on after they need a reset after the Cody Gunther stuff because
yeah.
they're really leaning heavily on SmackDown stuff to kind of carry this show.
Mm,
And so I hope that going into Netflix, they start to define who the stars of Raw are
yeah.
and what, because I feel like also going into Survivor Series, they're going to push SmackDown stuff on Raw. They're going to continue to push that stuff
Right.
because you got to have Sami Zayn involved and he's on Raw. So I think there's going to be a lot of, you know, brand crossover
Mm,
between Raw and SmackDown. So yeah, I hope that coming out of Crown Jewel and hopefully going into Survivor Series, maybe even after Survivor Series, just leading up into Netflix, they need to figure out what does Raw look like in 2025 because
yeah.
right now it's looking pretty weak as far as these shows.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, love Dom, but I don't think he's a marquee like guy. You know,
No, I
you
think the
can't.
only marquee guy they really have, and you could correct me if I'm wrong if I'm missing anyone. I would go Gunther and then Rhea Ripley is like up there, but even Rhea Ripley's storyline's getting stale to me right now. So
Yeah, but she's a big star though.
yeah. But I think they need more than I think they need to bolster it up. Get if they
Braun
want to do
Breaker, I think
bloodline
it.
stuff,
Yeah.
Braun Breaker, yeah, but he's still new. Like I wouldn't necessarily put him at that level
In
yet.
terms of
But
like, if you were making like, if you were on like the digital team or the marketing team, and you were making a poster from Monday Night Raw, like the faces you're putting on the poster, I think he's there.
yeah, of course. But that's what I think, like that's why I think you need hopefully after Crown Jewel, I
Mm,
think you got to get Drew and Punk back because it's
yeah.
clear the void they've left on Raw.
Yeah.
And like those are really like if you're making like the stars should be Drew, Punk, Gunther, Rhea.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And then if you're gonna have Goldberg on the show, at least leading into Survivor Series, at least that's another mega star that you can
Yeah.
put on your poster. I do love Braun Breaker. I just don't think he's on the tier of those guys yet because he's just
Yeah.
so new.
Carrying Cross.
Wow. The Miz, you're
The
right.
Miz. Yeah. All right, so that was Monday Night Raw this week. We also had another episode of NXT, NXT on the road. They are really building to this Philadelphia show next week. It kind of feels like they're almost marketing it like a PLE, even though it is just another NXT, weekly episode of television. But we got some good stuff on there. The big story coming out of NXT, like I said, is them building to this event next week in Philly at the old ECW arena. where Bubba Ray Dudley is back in the fold. Will at Halloween Havoc, we saw him kind of take the side of Trick Williams. Ridge Holland seems to be like the number one guy that they're going after, which I kind of thought was very odd and hot shot it out of nowhere. I guess him and his tag partner Ethan Page are going to be going up against Trick Williams and Bubba Ray Dudley next week in the ACW arena. Um, I get having wanting Bubba Dudley there to be, representing the old ECW, but this feels so just so weird. Like who is Ridge Holland and why is he in the main event?
Yeah, Ridge Holland was a weird pick
Mm,
for this whole feud with
yeah.
Bubba Ray Dudley, Trick Williams, Ethan Page, all that. By the way, are you going?
Not as of this recording, no.
Okay.
Maybe I'll
I
look at those picks on those tickets on StubHub and we'll
Yeah,
see.
if you get it last minute, because honestly, if I was near Philly, I would consider going.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
I think it's going to be an exciting show, and I think it's really cool. Especially, we'll get into it, but RVD getting into the fold as well, bring
yeah,
back. I'm sure there's going to be some surprises as well.
yeah.
I think it'll be a fun show to go to, and I think that arena is iconic. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely let me know if you consider going. I will
Mm-hmm.
say this about Bubba Ray Dudley though: criminally underrated promo guy. He
Yes.
is so awesome on the microphone. Like
Mm-hmm.
every time he's talking on the mic, I'm tuned in. I'm
Yeah.
locked in. And I thought it was really cool how he did the flip on this show about being like, I can't do this. I care too much about giving the
Mm-hmm.
spotlight to the younger guys.
Yeah.
And it should be more about them. This is NXT. It should be about them. But then
Mm-hmm.
being pushed to the point by these other two to be like, you know what? We're in the ECW arena. I got
Yeah.
one more match left in me. Let's go. Let's do
Mm-hmm.
this. And I don't think it's necessarily, I think instead of taking a spot, it's more elevating these other guys
100%.
to being, on that level. Working with Bubba Ray Dudley, you can learn so much from that guy. So I think it's going to be awesome for Trick Williams to learn from him. Ethan Page, I'm sure, is, over the
Yeah.
moon about working with Bubba Ray Dudley.
Yeah.
And Ridge Holland as well will hopefully take some stuff away from this because he's kind of been bland for his tenure in WWE. He's always just been kind of a background piece. So
I think
hopefully this
he,
could bring him to the forefront.
yeah, I just think he's bland in general, to be honest. I almost think it would have done more for him to just have a one-on-one match like with Bubba Ray Dudley, to give him that spotlight because
But
I
you do
think
get him that in that title picture though, just to be clear. Like you do get
yeah,
him in that trick. Like you could be a challenger for Trick Williams.
yeah. Um, just going back to your point about Bubba Ray Dudley and his promo skills. I think one of the things that Bubba Ray Dudley does better than anybody that I think like it separates him is he brings a level of authenticity to his style of wrestling. Because I think one of the big criticisms that wrestling fans have had over the last 10, 15, 20 years is like who believes that these flippy gymnast incredible athletes are actually going to be able to beat some of these larger guys in a fight. And Bubba Ray Dudley is a scary individual. Like not in the same way of like, like the Fiend scary, but like I really believe he could beat the shit out of most of these guys, even like when they're like the younger guys. Like who are you taking to fight, Bubba Ray Dudley or Javon Evans? Like, come on. Bubba Ray Dudley will mop the floor with these people. And I think that's that level of believability that he brings that I really enjoy. He's not like an old, I mean, he's old, yes, older for wrestling, but like he's not like Ric Flair going out there in his last match and having a heart attack on the ropes. Like he can still go. He is a former world champion in a lot of places. Like he having a longer stint than just for this ECW show in NXT kind of makes sense to me. I think he's a great person who you could just throw on the roster arguably full time and just have him beat it at, like, yeah, he's going to eat a lot of pins and elevate a lot of guys, but like, you kind of need that in NXT right now. That veteran force to really like get guys over.
Yeah, I remember watching that Stone Cold Broken Sessions
Mm,
interview with Bubba Ray Dudley. And he said then that like if the storyline makes sense and it's something that intrigues me
mm,
from a story perspective, he would be down to do it no matter what
mm,
stage of his career. And to that point about his just being authentic and believable, I think the physical look is one thing because he
mm.
does is an intimidating guy, but that's where the promo comes in because he
Yeah.
uses his physicality to like intimidate people, and he speaks slowly on the mic. He doesn't have to do so much on the mic. He can
Mm,
speak slowly because you believe every word that he's saying, and he really can talk down to you and like make you feel like, oh wow, like
mm.
not only am I being talked down to, but there's nothing I can do about it
Yeah,
because he's just such a physical presence. So that combination, it doesn't matter how old he is, he could do that for the next 10 years if he wants to, and
yeah,
he'll still be Bubba Ray Dudley, or even like we got little glimpses of Bully Ray, I feel like, as well.
yeah.
So I hope he can. I've always wanted him to have a solid like Bully Ray esque run in WWE. It would be cool to see him do that in NXT. Like even if he did like turn his back on Trick and we got a Trick Bully Ray style
I think that's
feud,
on the table, dude. I think it
that
is.
that would be, I would be so down for that. I think he could tell a really great story with that.
I think the one of the things that comes to mind with what I would want to see from this run is whether it's Trick, whether it's Ridge, whoever. I want to see Bubba Ray Dudley versus one of them extreme rules hardcore match, but I want it, but if you can capture that magic similar to like that old Cactus Jack Randy Orton match from 2004, like you can really make a guy by giving him the win in like a really violent match like that, and like showing that like he's not just like, you know, a pretty face, or like there's layers to their character. I think that could do wonders for either Trick or Ridge Holland.
100%. And I do hope that this isn't just like a one off thing, but
Yeah,
it very well could be in either way. I mean, it's,
yeah.
he could do whatever he wants to do, but I selfishly, I would love to see him involved more in this NXT
Could you
show.
imagine what levels it would bring to NXT if, like, this, even in this tag match, which I assume will end up being Extreme Rules, like, you put someone through a flaming table? I don't fully expect that to happen on television, but it would bring the product to, like, a whole nother level of, like, or just the wrestlers involved. It would bring them to another level.
It would definitely be a defining moment for
Yeah.
just NXT history. I think
Yeah.
that's what's so exciting about next week's show is that it's going to be NXT was always, since it's like rise to stardom in like the 2014 2015 era to now, it's always been compared to ECW as far as like
Yeah.
the rabid audience, and then especially later on in those years when they kind of meshed with the independent promotions, like WWE did ECW right even
Yeah.
after they messed up the ECW they had before, because
Yeah.
like NXT is what ECW should have been all those
Mhm.
years ago. Just taking those indie guys and really having your own independent promotion as well as a developmental promotion at the
Mhm.
same time, putting those two things together, having a passionate
Mhm.
fan base at every show, and just letting them do their thing. And I
Yeah.
feel like it's come full circle now with them being in the ECW arena. I'm so excited for next week.
Real quick, we weren't plan. I wasn't planning to talk about this, but you brought it up, and so I'm gonna just bring it up. WWE signed this new. I forget what the term is. It's like WWE ID.
Yeah.
And as somebody ingrained in the independent wrestling scene right now, I'd love to get your thoughts on what you think this means for WWE and the industry as a whole.
I and that's a great question, Jason, but I do want to hold off my thoughts until later. I almost want to do a separate video entirely on it because I have
Okay,
so many thoughts on it, but I also want to see how it plays out in like the coming weeks. I feel like I can't rush to judgments at this moment when I barely have any idea what it
that's
necessarily
fair.
means or the impact of it. But a quick note I'll say is that as far as like a prediction for it, I think it'll ultimately be a good thing versus a bad thing.
For those listening who have no idea what we're talking about, WWE came out with this announcement this week, and where they basically have branded a couple wrestling schools throughout the country. I think it's like five or six. One of them is Booker T's Reality of Wrestling. One is Black and Brave and Seth Rollins in Iowa. And there's a
Nightmare
couple
Factory.
Nightmare Factory in Georgia. And WWE has basically branded these as WWE developmental programs for independent wrestlers. So if you're training at these programs, you're basically bookmarked to get a leg up at potentially getting into the performance center. They're basically watching these people. They have specific programs, and they can have specific wrestlers who are tied to this program, which I think is eventually going to be a good thing because it doesn't necessarily change their trajectory of like what, you know, as far as like what shows they're going to do, but it's going to get them paid more than anything else, which at the end of the day I'm all for.
Yeah, again, I'm gonna reserve judgment for it
Mm-hmm.
until I see kind of what the after effects are. You kind of want to see like the cause is WWE creates this ID program with multiple schools. What is the effect? What is gonna ultimately be the result of this decision being made. I think I've seen different responses from all sorts of independent wrestlers, which I find so fascinating. What
Mhm.
their take of it is, I see independent wrestlers being like through the moon, like this is 100% a great thing overall for independent wrestling. I've seen independent wrestlers who really don't like it, who
Yeah.
really think that this could have detrimental effects to the independent wrestling
Mhm.
business or these promotions who might not have gotten the WWE ID.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see.
We'll have to see. All right. And then one last thing before we wrap up this video here. I wanted to give a shout out to the women of NXT because they were on this episode a lot. The casket match between Tatum Paxley and Wendy Chu I thought was really entertaining. We got a little bit of a mishmash segment with like 10 of the women, five baby faces, five heels, toxic attraction, all like the debuting not Delta. What do they call it? Zarya.
Zarya.
So there's a lot on this show, and I just wanted to give them credit.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about this more because Zarya already one match in my favorite woman in WWE,
Oh
maybe.
wow! All right.
I love Zarya's look. She's
Mhm.
unique. She's a powerhouse, but not in like the same way like a Rhea Ripley or Raquel or
Mhm.
even Nia Jax is. She's just an absolute beast. Like she
Mhm.
really is someone who made her mark. And I think what's perfect about NXT having a North American championship or a mid card title is that Zarya could run through Fallon Henley,
Yeah.
win this title, and then go on like a Gunther style run with it, where she's
Yeah.
just dominating women. You think there's underdogs that might have a shot at dethroning Zarya, but not. I could see her winning that title, holding on to it for a year plus, and then you ultimately have that building while you're still having women compete in the main event, and it's not necessarily taking away. Because if you put Zarya in the NXT Women's Division, you might run into a brick wall where like
Yeah.
you can't have her lose, but then you also don't want your top stars losing as well. I think
Right.
Zarya fits perfectly in the NXT mid card for the time being. Give her that belt as soon as possible. Let her go on a run with it. Maybe like an Oba Femi style as another example. And just have her dominate because she
Yeah.
looks so impressive in her match with Brindley Reese. And they're already putting her like across from main event stars
Yeah.
in NXT and alongside them as well. So I'm excited for Zarya. Also, we got Jordan Grace making a return to NXT. My ultimate question, though, to you, Jason, are we going to get an NXT women's showcase at War Games?
Oh,
And that's
interesting.
that's everyone's talking about. Is it going to be a mismatch of Tiffany, Nia, and whoever else they could get, Chelsea Green, whatever? Is it going to be a Raw thing where the Judgment Day
Mhm.
bring on three women and then take on Raw? I think this is the best option for WWE right now as far as their women's War Games match.
Yeah, that is interesting because I don't think on the main roster there's any story that you'd really have to shoehorn something in there to get like you'd have to get like Nia and Tiffany and heels versus like Bailey and Naomi. And like no one really wants to see that at this point. So if they are committed to having a women's war games match, then I think then this is the only route to go. Maybe there's something you could do with like the whole Rhea and Liv and Raquel, and they all I don't know. I think it's possible with given that Liv and Naya are kind of crossing paths at Crown Jewel. I think if that's very possible that they could try and have everybody combine forces there. But would it be better if it was the NXT? Yes, I do think it would be better if it was the NXT women. I don't know how likely it is, but because we're kind of getting that 5-on-5 match next week. Um, so I don't know how likely it is, but they're just certainly deserving of the spot.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like they set it up so seamlessly for this
Mhm.
show to do like a War Games match. And so I if they do the 5-on-5, that's great and all, but like what better way to showcase how awesome this
Mhm.
NXT women's division has become over the past year than to put them on the main roster and be like, you know what? Show us what you got. Because
Yeah.
I think that's again, the way they did it so seamlessly on the show, the way they've been building it up for the past few months, it makes more sense than a mishmash of main roster people that really have no business teaming up with each other. At least there's some sort of semblance of, chemistry between these two teams. And it just makes sense given this final angle if they did an NXT Women's War Games match on the main roster.
Yeah, I think the biggest obstacle for me from getting there is that you have to like recognizing that like the NXT audience and the main roster audience are so completely separate that like just like hot shotting an NXT Women's War Games match, although it would be awesome and we know it would be deserved, I feel like the main roster audience would just be like, what? Who are these people? Why is this here? Why do I care? Type thing.
It's in Vancouver, and I think they're like a more smart fan base to where they would appreciate the
Yeah,
NXT women. And it's not like these women are complete unknowns. Like Roxanne Perez is,
yeah,
been around the main roster. I think Jordan Grace being from TNA, which was largely
mm,
based in Canada for a long time, will
mm,
help.
mm.
Um, and obviously you have international. So I just think it's a good way to spotlight them, and you could have them appear on the main roster over time in the build
Yeah,
up to War Games, that so that people become more familiar with them.
yeah.
I yeah, I just think that it would be a really cool thing to see in
I
War
will
Games.
say
I feel like I had a
this.
different point, but
I will say this. I think the NXT women's roster is so good, but I actually think it's kind of oversaturated at this point. I think you're gonna get like a lot of new women talent going to the main roster, maybe immediately after WrestleMania, if not sooner. Like
yeah.
I really think like all your top NXT women stars are getting called up like imminently. Like Cora Jade, Roxanne Perez, even maybe like the Julias, the Stephanie Vacours, like Jada Parker, Kalani Jordan. They're all going up. And I really think they're going to start fresh with this next group very soon.
Yeah, I can even see some Rumble appearances, like
Oh,
and
100%.
like someone appearing in the Rumble, but then like making that their debut, and then they continue from there.
Yeah, 100%. Last thing I want to talk about with NXT, we were talking about call ups. You had mentioned his name is Obafemi going to the main roster, and because I we haven't seen him since was not on the show after Halloween Havoc. Obafemi on the main roster would be incredible. I think that he is a bona fide superstar in the making. You could put him in there with the likes of Jacob Fatu, Braun Breaker immediately. Take my money. So I'm fairly confident that is the direction. I don't know how soon we see him. Maybe it's right after Crown Jewel. Maybe they wait into the Rumble and they give him some time off. I don't know. But Obafemi to the main roster seems sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I would love to see Obafemi on the main roster. He obviously dropped the North American Championship, already had his rematch on Halloween Havoc.
Mm,
I could see him easily being like a Rumble appearance. That could be like the big NXT
mm,
appearance in the Rumble. Do they call him up after that? Uh, who knows? I think, but for sure, he'll be on the main roster by the time we get to post WrestleMania.
100%.
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed.
Oh,
All
and then
right.
this is my final point, though.
Yes.
They do have Regal on NXT now, which
Yeah.
means they could have him come out and announce War Games, which is all, that'll always give me a pop.
There you
So
go.
there you go.
There you go. Real quick, we haven't. There's not a ton to talk about with AEW, which is really unfortunate because how far it's fallen. But like specific, like I tried, guys. I went through the rundown, tried to figure out what was there to talk about. The Shell and Benjamin stuff, the Hurt Syndicate stuff is fine. I don't have a ton to say about it. Will, I don't know if you have anything to talk about with AEW. I feel like there's one thing that you're probably you're chomping at the bit to talk about here,
Of
so I'll let you have
course.
the floor.
So before I get to my one thing, I will say this about AEW. It's not like I want to talk about AEW,
Mm,
but it's also more so than whatever's going on in AEW. It's just more the circumstance of when we record. We record these on Tuesdays and Wednesday. By the time this comes out, AEW is going to be on, and so it's tough. But
yeah.
we will, if you guys do want to see more AEW content, then I'm more than happy to talk about it. We'll figure out a way. We'll still be covering pay-per-views and whatnot. And
Mm,
if there's any major stuff, like of course Shane McMahon, if he ever
yes.
appears, we're gonna be the next day. We will be talking about that. So the one thing I do want to talk about, just because it's been a theme on this show, we
Yeah.
have been on Big Boom AJ Watch for wrestling,
Sound
and
the
he said
alarm.
I was chomping at the bit. Jason really wanted to talk about this. He messaged me. He's like, we got to talk about this. So I was like, okay, fine. We can
Uh-huh.
talk about it, Jason.
Mm-hmm.
Big Boom AJ is getting his match against QT Marshall, which is a bit disappointing. I'm not gonna lie, but as far as like
He's
that
gonna win.
lower mid card, that's the best opponent you're gonna get because he's experienced. He's gonna be able to get a good match
Second
out of
best.
Big Boom AJ. And I, yeah, of course, he's going to, like you said, he's going to be able to get a win. And I think
Mhm.
that was the main thing. I saw an interview with AJ where he wanted to go to WWE. He was kind of holding out for WWE. He's
Mhm.
been an independent wrestler. His main goal was to be in WWE. But he
Yeah.
had so many connections from independent wrestling who now work in
Mhm.
AEW, and they approached him like, we don't want to make you like a joke, basically.
Yeah.
I don't even think WWE would have given AJ a match. So the
No.
fact that AEW's given him a match and potentially a win over one of their guys, it's exciting. And it was funny that you mentioned his opponent being Paul White, because this is the last Paul White match we've seen.
Yeah.
So maybe, you never know. But Big Boom AJ, QT Marshall at the Prudential Center. My
Yeah.
sister actually called me about this and
That's
was like,
hilarious.
she was like, did you know like AJ is going to be wrestling? And I'm like, Elise, what do you like? Are you kidding me? Like, I was like, of course I know this. It's like, and she was like, are you going to go? And I'm like, well, I might be a
Mhm.
bit of a stretch driving all the way to New Jersey just to see Big Boom AJ. Might be tough. We'll see what the rest of the Full Gear card looks like,
Yeah.
but I'm excited for this, and I know you are too. So big celebration for Big Boom AJ with Big Justice in his corner. How exciting is that? They're gonna bring the boom to Full Gear. And I will say this, just to wrap this whole thing up. I
Yeah.
do think, though, if we can be serious for a second, this is the nice punctuation mark, the end of the Costco guys run here as memes. I think this will be a fun way to,
As
you know what? We
memes.
had fun. We've had fun with them. We've had the boom. We've had Big Justice. They've been given the boomer doom. But ultimately, it feels like this is like the ultimate culmination of the story of AJ, where he was an independent wrestler. He was able to
Mhm.
blow up as a meme. And finally, his ultimate accomplishment, getting a wrestling match in a major promotion
Yeah.
on pay per view. It would just be a nice cherry on top of the whole Costco guys thing. And then afterwards, we could kind of,
Mhm.
nicely, put them aside. They're fun. I'm never going to hate the Costco guys, but I think ultimately the gimmick's kind of worn off. We're all kind of,
Yeah.
collectively over them. They were just on the Tonight Show. We could just put a nice little bow on
Mhm.
the end of the story of the Costco guys, and that could be that. The Rizzler is a different story, but the Costco guys, you know, let's put them to bed after Full Gear.
Paul White, if you're listening, please come to Full Gear.
Oh
Please
no.
knock the hell out of these jokers. I just want to see it. I haven't wanted to see you in so long, but now is your time. Um,
He's gonna be front row at Survivor Series. I don't know what you guys are
yeah, he's going to be training it.
thinking.
He's going to be the next coach at NXT in two
Yeah.
months. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Crown Jewel Predictions video coming up right after this. So watch that. We'll be here again next week covering it all. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Peace.